So yes, both these two shoes do use that DNA tuned midsole, but just like all the other brands, just because it says it's got the same foam on the shoe doesn't mean that it is the same foam, and that's exactly the case between these two shoes. Shoe comparison I've got for you guys today. So we have got the Brooks Glycerin 22 up against the Brooks Glycerin Max. So I'll go through their similarities, their differences and their key features, and hopefully from that, that'll give you guys a great indication of choosing the right shoe for you. But before we get into it, a big shout out to my #1 running store, the Running Company at Geelong. I've got a link to their website in the description. Make sure you go check out that and check out all their running gear. And also guys, if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And with the specs, so both neutral road running shoes, and we've certainly got the Glycerin Max in the max cushion category, and the Glycerin 22 is the premium daily trainer offering from Brooks. Now in the price, massive difference there in the price. Personally, I think they are both overpriced. Like, I'd like to see the Glycerin Max at about the same price as where the Glycerin 22 sits, and probably about $10 cheaper for the Glycerin 22. Now, in the weight, surprisingly, there is not much between these two shoes, but can you really feel any difference on the foot? Well, not really in the weight, you don't notice, but you do notice that this really big, chunky midsole that the Glycerin Max has got. So it does feel like the beefier and chunky shoe, as you can see there with the difference in the stack heights. Now, I'll tell you what you can notice is also that difference in the drop. So we've got a 10 mil in 22 and a 6 mil in the Max. And in our uppers, so we have got two pretty premium looking uppers here. Now with the Glycerin 22, the material that they use here is a engineered double jacquard. Now this material overall is quite thick, but it does have breathability zones, especially here through the toe box. But the breathability is okay, but it's not the best. Overall, it's still a pretty hot shoe. Really solid heel counter, so it's like a tank. There is a really solid cup there. A little Achilles flare here on the back it features, and also we've got this elastic rim just around the top of the heel collar there. Now that doesn't touch the skin, but I think it's just there for looks. Now we've got a plush amount of padding around the heel collar here, probably the most padding that I think I've ever seen in a shoe, to be quite honest. So much there, and that plushness rolls into this super plush, puffy tongue. Now the tongue is not gusseted. Now with our lacing system, it's pretty standard, so very similar to what you'd see on a normal Glycerin shoe, and they've got those really thick puffy laces as well. Now in the lockdown, I have struggled a little bit in the lockdown in this shoe just because there's just so much padding around the heel collar. The padding in the heel collar here goes right down almost to the bottom of the shoe, of pretty much where your foot sits. So my foot feels like it sits pretty high in this shoe, but you can play around with it a little bit and you can get the lockdown dialed in. Now in the fit, because there's so much padding in this shoe, I've gone up half a size because the padding was just pushing my foot forward, and it just felt like I just didn't have enough wiggle room in this shoe, especially for a daily trainer. So I went half a size. If the padding doesn't worry you, I would say it's true to size in the length. There's a good amount of volume in the toe box as well. Now with our Glycerin Max, so the material they use here is a engineered air mesh. But the breathability compared to the Glycerin Max, I think is about the same. But the material itself, I don't think it feels as thick. It probably looks puffier, but it's not as thick. Now, in our heel counter, we have got, it's slightly a less rigid heel counter. So that doesn't have a solid cup in this one. So the Glycerin 22 definitely have the more solid heel counter, but we still have a plush amount of padding around the heel collar. I will say that the Glycerin 22 has got more padding around the heel collar than the Glycerin Max. And again, a big puffy tongue here on the Glycerin Max. Got a cool little Achilles flare as well there, so we don't have the heel tab on this one. Now with our lacing system here, so it's standard, but it's not straight up and down the shoe. It's a little bit skew-if, and it goes sort of the other way. So it does look funny, but it doesn't affect the lockdown in this shoe. I will say that the lockdown in the Glycerin Max is better for me than the Glycerin 22 because my foot just sits in it properly, and the padding just wraps around the bottom of my foot and below the ankle there just nicely. Now in the fit, true to size for me in the Glycerin Max, and it is a pretty roomy fit, but in comparison to the Glycerin 22, so this is a US 9, This is a US 8.5, and in the length department, in the volume department, they are about the same. So if that's going to give you any indication of what the size difference is between these two shoes. So for me, the 8.5 matches up in the Glycerin Max with the Glycerin 22 in the US size 9. Now build quality, obviously they're both Brooks. It's always obviously going to be excellent, but step-in comfort, so it's different. The Glycerin Max is probably the most comfortable shoe you can put on your foot. So the step-in comfort of this shoe is a lot better, I think, than the Glycerin 22. And in the outsole, so a few little similarities going on here. They both have really thick, robust rubber, and they both have their rubber coverage quite segmented off. But the durability in both these two shoes is going to be excellent. What these two shoes do differ in performance is how they perform in the wet, so the grip. So the Glycerin 22, I have had some issues here, especially on a wet bitumen road or a tar road. Yeah, so once that's just freshly wet road, this shoe turns into a bit of an ice skate, which is a little bit disappointing, especially when the grip in their other shoes for me tends to work. So I'm not too sure if it's just the grip pattern in the Glycerin 22 that's caused this slipping issue in the wet, or it's just a different type of rubber. I'm not sure what's going on, but Glycerin Max, as you can see here, they have got different rubber coverage. The rubber does feel a little bit different, but the tread pattern certainly feels a little bit more aggressive, but grip in the wet performance wise, this one is far superior. So this is one of the better grips on the market at the moment. It doesn't falter in any conditions whatsoever. Now what you can see is on some more features on the bottom of the shoes. They've just got some exposed foam, and they have got some little channels on the bottom of each shoe. So we've got a little channel here through the rear of the foot. That's just to add a little bit of bounce through the rear of the shoe of the Glycerin 22. And they've got some channels through the Glycerin Max here. So again, through the rear there to add a little bit of bounce in the rear. But they've also got these aggressive cutouts through the forefoot as well. And that's also going to soften up the forefoot in the Glycerin Max. And in our midsole, so we have got DNA tuned in both shoes. However, I can tell you that these foams are totally different. So they feel different to the touch, and they feel different on the run as well. So with the Glycerin Max, even just to the feel, the look and the touch, it feels really spongy, really airy, and it's quite easy to get your fingers into. Whereas the Glycerin 22 DNA tuned, it's actually quite dense. So it feels really thick, dense, no way near as spongy, and it's certainly a lot firmer or a lot less compliant than the foam in the Glycerin Max. But here, simple designs in both shoes, so we don't have plates in either shoe, but rigidity wise, they are quite different. So with the Glycerin Max, I can pretty much bend that quite easily. And also left and right, there's a little bit of twist there, but not too bad. But with our Glycerin Max, this shoe doesn't have a plate, but this shoe is super stiff. So really, really hard to bend this shoe just because it's just got so much of that midsole foam. And movement left and right, it's probably about the same in the movement left and right, but massive difference in the rigidity of the shoe. And obviously that is going to translate with how the geometry is affected by the shoe. So with the Glycerin 22, it's much more of a traditional geometry. So I don't think that this shoe is as rocketed as the previous model. I think they've gone back to a little bit more of a traditional geometry, whereas in the Glycerin Max, they have got a pretty late and pretty aggressive forefoot rocker. So it's not too late where you can't feel it when you're jogging around in this shoe. It's just, for me, it's just in the right spot, so you can you can dig yourself out of this foam quite easily with the position of this nice big rocker. And those differences in the foam certainly translate into the ride. So with the Glycerin 22, so that denser foam certainly results in a firmer ride here. But I will say, the more I run in this shoe is softening up. So out of this box, this one was quite firm for me, and it felt a little bit dead, but it certainly has softened up as the runs have gone on. So I think I'm about 50, 60 kilometers in the Glycerin 22 now. And certainly you do get much more sink through the heel, so and a little bit of bounce through the heel, which is quite nice, and that's exactly what that DNA tuned is meant to do. And it does firm up through the middle of the shoe, and I'm not going to say it's a responsive toe off, but it's certainly a firmer toe off than what you get out of the heel. So, but overall, yeah, I don't say it's a responsive shoe. It's a very cushioned shoe. You feel really protected from the road, but overall, it's quite a dense type cushion. It's pretty stable as well, and this foam, I think, is going to just last forever, so I don't think it's going to break down too quickly. Now, with the Glycerin Max, now this shoe is just on another planet with the ride that it delivers. So I haven't experienced a shoe that delivers the shock absorption properties that this shoe does. So this foam, it sort of feels like a jello-y foam that it just takes all the impact out of the road. It's absolutely amazing. As I said, it's softer than the Glycerin 22 by a long way, but again, it's not a real sluggish softness. It's just this really unique feeling of foam. But yeah, good amount of sink through the heel, and it does firm up through the toe off. And this rocker, as I said, it's just aggressive enough, and it can pull you out of that foam quite easily and tick the legs along. This shoe to run in it's got to be one of the most comfortable rides on the market. This, as I said, this foam, I can't talk up this foam in this shoe highly enough. But just to compare the softness of both shoes, so if I use my softness scale, so I'm going to give the Glycerin Max, I'll give this about a 9 out of 10 of all the shoes that are on the market in the softness scale, and I think I'll probably give the Glycerin Max maybe a 6.5, maybe a 7 out of 10. So you can see there's a fair difference in the softness of both shoes, even though they both claim that there's DNA tuned in both. But just remember, like all the other brands, just because the foams say that they are the same name, it doesn't mean that they are the same formulation, and that's certainly the case in these shoes. And best shoes, so for me, both these two shoes are pretty much ticking off on the same types of runs, except they do it on different levels. So obviously this one is marketed as the daily trainer, and that's where it is going to shine. It's going to eat up your daily miles, but I think it's going to really shine at that really slow pace. So the easy days, your recovery days as well, just pretty much if you're on your easy days, you don't like a really soft and mushy shoe, I think this one is a great option for that. Oh, long runs, yes, okay, I would probably say up to about 90 minutes, but it's not overall a very efficient shoe for me, so I'd probably shy away from it for a long run. Doesn't mean that you can't use it for a long run, and obviously I wouldn't use it for any speed day sessions as well, because yeah, I don't get much kickback out of this foam. And pretty much same with the Glycerin Max. So, but this one, recovery days, easy days, so this is when your legs are pounded, this is the shoe you put on. It's just really going to protect your legs, especially if you can only run on concrete, because yeah, it's just, as I said, it's just going to take all the shock absorption out of the road. It's just amazing. Now obviously this one is certainly not a speed shoe at all. Would I take this one on a long run? But yes, again, I'd probably only up to about 90 minutes though, because it is a big, beefy shoe. It's a little bit too much shoe for me, especially to take on one of those really long runs. And again, that foam's just a little bit too soft, not so efficient for me to take on those really long runs. So yes, both these two shoes do use that DNA tuned midsole, but just like all the other brands, just because it says it's got the same foam on the shoe doesn't mean that it is the same foam, and that's exactly the case between these two shoes. So if you're one of those people like I was expecting the Glycerin 22 just to be a bit of a toned down version of the Glycerin Max, well, you may be a little disappointed, as I was. But if you are a traditional Glycerin fan, then I think you guys are going to be pretty impressed of the upgrades in this shoe, because I do think the midsole foam here is a worthy upgrade from the previous model. So it's much better than the DNA Loft V3. So I am pretty impressed with how this shoe is softening up, and it's coming alive a little bit for me, even though I do think it's still a little boring as a daily trainer. But obviously that's a no contest for me. If I had to choose between these two shoes, I'm definitely going the Glycerin Max, because I absolutely love this shoe, even though I think it is way too expensive. But anyway, guys, that's it from me. Any questions you've got regarding these two shoes, please just feel free to ask me in the comments below. And any other questions you got, you know where to put them. Thanks for watching. Make sure you give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.